Are your customer acquisition costs too high? Lifetime values too low? Are you uncertain if your communication strategies are helping or hurting the efficiency and effectiveness of your marketing efforts? Welcome to the Continuous Revenue Marketing Podcast, where the most influential marketers in the world are sharing their insights and lessons on the critical topics they and their chief executives must address daily. How to drive consistent business growth by delivering more revenues through profitable acquisition and customer lifetime value maximization strategies. What you're going to hear today by listening to this podcast are the actual strategies and tactics our marketing experts are using to achieve these critical missions. Hi, I'm Russell Kern, CEO and founder of Kern and Omnicom Agency, and I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Elliott Dennis. And today we are honored to have as our special guest, Eric Harris, AVP Brand and Creative of E-Trade from Morgan Stanley. And Eric, it's nice to meet you and thank you and welcome for joining our podcast today.
Good to be here, thanks.
Thanks so much, I appreciate it. Clearly, let's set the stage and give people context of who you are, your background, where you are. You have extensive background in digital design on the agency side, and now you're leading brand and creative internally at E-Trade. Can you give us a little bit of background on your career path and what drove you ultimately to E-Trade?
It's interesting because I actually started at an in-house agency in a regulated industry. Then I went to an agency and then back to in-house. So it's almost full circle. Once again, finding myself in the highly regulated industry. So it's been fun from the start. Right out of college, I got my feet wet at a medical devices agency, medical device company rather, as a graphic designer. And we were in an in-house print production and marketing and advertising department. So a lot of what we did was design for print, sell sheets, catalogs, trade show displays, that kind of thing. One day the boss said, "Hey, who can update this website page?" Our company had a little fledgling website and I volunteered and I got hooked. So
you mentioned highly regulated industries.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that affect you as the brand and creative leader within the business? How is that different than others? What does that change for you?
Okay, well, being regulated means you can't say certain things or you can't say it in certain ways. For instance, in medical devices, you're regulated by the FDA. And when you're talking about a product that's going into someone's body that could affect their health and affect their life, you have to be very clear on what it does and what it can do, what it is and what it isn't. There's not a lot of room for storytelling per se. You can't make any advertising claims that aren't on the up and up 100%. So in terms of creativity, it seems like you're a little constrained by those regulations. What you learn to do is express the brand through other means other than storytelling in the retail sense. So yeah.
So I have another thing that you mentioned, which was, I was asked to do something in terms of website. I started to do coding, and then I learned front coding. What I hear that have accomplished your success is you volunteered early, you learned, and the more you got involved, the more you grew. And so, right. Maybe that's a philosophy you can expand upon for any marketers that are listening, how important it is just to take advantage of opportunity, because you never know what the future is going to be.
Right, you never do. And we work in an industry that's always at kind of the cutting edge of technology and innovation, and there's always going to be something new. When I was in college, the internet was relatively new, and we had teachers in college teaching on subjects that they themselves were only just learning or had learned maybe for a few months. So it's always been an evolving thing. It's been a process. So I would say, yeah, you have to reach out and learn and volunteer, do new things, and be ready to take on new ideas and new responsibilities. That's just how it works in the world that we live in.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more with that. I talk about all the time that I had my master's in my 20s essentially. I learned digital overnight. As kind of like consider that young hot shot. I'm like, I'm learning this in real time, just like you are, as the internet's coming out right when we're graduating from college. our generation. So like kind of, so I know we have a very interesting perspective, you and I, on technology, so from webmaster to interactive art director, and now, leading brand and creative. Can you share with our audience, how that digital background, well positioned you to now lead brand and creative, and all above the line and all traditional, et cetera?
Oh, sure. So I think to me, it all goes back to, I mentioned college and, learning principles and, first principles of design, which are things like balance, unity, rhythm, variety, contrast, everything that we do visually and in terms of even sound, like the texture of sound and the mood that it adds to an advertising spot. It all kind of plays the same way. These first principles of design, kind of, when you apply them, you can be successful at just about any medium. So I kind of applied those things to everything that I did, not just graphic design, but in terms of marketing. There's a certain, pace and a rhythm that you want to go for. In copywriting, the same deal. So I think my background in trying to learn everything new that I could and taking on different things just helped me, gain more experience in applying these principles to new things, and that culminates in, what is known today as branding. Like, we didn't always have branding as kind of a separate discipline, right? We had sales and marketing.
Yeah.
And especially, where I was coming from in a primarily B2B situation, sales and marketing always leans a little towards sales. So I think extrapolating the marketing from sales and marketing and further extrapolating branding from that, it's been a great help in just having those guiding principles.
Yeah, as we were talking before, our kind of call here, Eric, is great seeing you again. We met at A&A, back when it was starting to be hybrid again in person last summer. So, on that trend, speaking of A&A, they released a monumental study in 2018 that's, I quote, 78% of its members had an in-house agency compared to 53% in 2013. And then there's been a lot in the media the last year and a half, as Ad Age and others report there's been about 7% increase in in-housing during the pandemic. So I definitely say, in-housing is no longer a trend. It's definitely, here to stay. So what's been your take? Now you've been in E-Trade for about 6 years, and how have you seen that evolve over those 6-year times? And what's been working well, and maybe not so well, and what do you kind of see as the future to Russell's point, CMOs, pondering whether or not they should bring some of that work in house?
Yeah. So I think that external agencies have always been kind of a thing, and especially for larger, more established companies. And I think there will always be a place for the external agency. Like I said, you always need that occasional injection of fresh thought, or you always need extra hands to work on things like trafficking. But in terms of anything that touches, intellectual property and the secret sauce that makes your company tick, I think having in-house employees means that they're closer to the brand, they're closer to the company culture, they're able to express that authentically. And that authenticity, I think, equals currency in today's marketplace in a very real way. I think also COVID, just the fact that we all went remote for a long time, or many of us had to go remote, I think it's kind of broken down or narrowed that line between external and internal agencies. When you went to work with an external agency, a lot of time it was a phone call or a Zoom. And that was different from what you did when you just went next door to somebody's desk and said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" So now, instead of going to somebody's desk in the office, you're going to Zoom again. So that line is getting thinner. And I think it's making people realize that it's not exactly where someone sits on your team, but what they're doing. And realizing that we can connect with people just as easily on a virtual basis as we can in person. So I see in-housing as a great thing. I think the more companies internalize that stuff that makes them special, I think the more they have a competitive advantage, the more they can be authentic in the marketplace. And like I said, I think there's always going to be a place for the external agency. So we'll just see how it evolves.
Do you ever worry, Eric, that the team doesn't bring a breadth of perspective. In other words, the team gets, I'll use the word stale, or we've been focused on working on it because we're so close to it. How do you balance and maintain your team's freshness? Because I do hear on one point is, listen, they know our culture, they know our business, they know our brand, they're very efficient, they live the brand. But depending on what the project is there any downside on in-housing creatively?
Sure. I mean, there could be. You always want to stay fresh, right? And there's the opportunity to get stale if you're just doing the same things over and over again. So like I said, I think it's not about where you sit, but what you're doing. And if what you're doing in-house is owning that intellectual capital and owning the brand juice, as it were, you need to stay fresh doing that by moving on to different projects. If your in-house team, all they're doing is cranking out banner ads, that's going to get stale.
Yeah.
So once you design the banner ad, once you design the system that your visual creative goes into, it's fine to outsource that or send it to another team and then kind of govern its use based on your brand guide. Move on to something else and stay fresh. A brand is always evolving. It's always changing like people are. So I think there's always going to be another thing to move on to if you just make sure to keep your eyes open to it, keep your head up and move forward.
So I'm gonna, Elliott, if you wouldn't mind, and then maybe you can go deeper into this question, into this aspect. But the market's moved, consumers are moved. Without providing trade secret, how do you see the consumer of financial services having changed in this last year, or even these last months? What do you feel that you can share with our audience about the change of consumer sentiment and perspective about financial services and advisory services, investment services?
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I hope I don't get in trouble for commenting on any of
No,
this. I'm certainly not a financial guy. From where I sit, I've seen, probably what everyone else is seeing in public. If you're watching, Wall Street or CNBC or whatever, you're seeing that there was an explosion in investing. There's also been, a lot of trouble in the marketplace. Stocks are really, really down right now. And I'm sure there's a lot of different factors for that, but it seemed like somehow between everybody staying at home in COVID and the breakdown of the supply chain and, wars overseas and everything, there was like this perfect storm of financial activity. So it's become a very, very active industry to be working in.
Yeah, for sure. Elliott, let me throw it over to you.
Yeah, on that kind of tone of trends, and I love what you shared about the blurring the lines between internal and external, and it's not really where they are, it's what they're doing. Congrats, you were a judge on ANA's recent in-house agency conference for their in-house excellence award. So again, as the evolution has evolved over the years, it's really exciting to see that there now actually is an in-house agency forum, and there are, awards there, just like Effie Awards, et cetera, et cetera. So can you tell us about some of their trends you picked up, from the in-housing overall and from other companies that you were watching, not so much just, what guys are doing or what you're doing in your sector, but, what are just some of those other trends you picked up from, any vertical that were some of those award winners that you were judging that all have robust in-house teams?
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to say the ANA is a great organization and I'm really thankful to be a part of that. Also thankful to my company for allowing us to do this paneling, this judging on in-house company time. So thanks for that. We saw a lot of different trends, and the thing that really stood out to me is the quality of the work coming through in-house teams, how it's gotten higher over the years. One campaign dealt with TikTok and like soft drinks, which something that wasn't even around 15 years ago. It was just great to see that this was done in-house. Coors did something related to what's that Karate Kid show, the Cobra
Kai, the new Netflix.
Yeah. So we got to look at their spots. In terms of trends, I think that's the main thing that I'm seeing is just it may have something to do with the trend you mentioned of in-housing. The quality of the work has just gotten better in-house that you used to see. So
I'm going to follow up, because I want to talk about Super Bowl just a little bit. You're very famous from your creativity as it relates to the E-Trade baby and the Super Bowl. Kern does a lot and is committed to neuroscience testing of Super Bowl ads. We grab ads before the game, we send them to our neuro testing lab, we get the results because everyone's spending tens of millions of dollars of various types to create their ads, but not all ads generate the same engagement and persuasion and memorability and action desired. What can you share about your overarching strategy as it relates to Super Bowl itself, your E-Trade baby? Again, no trade secret, but how do you see that fit into the business?
It's easy not to share trade secrets on this because I'm not even part of the team that did the Super Bowl ad.
Okay, good. That's
but
good.
My boss was just talking about this in another forum and said that the E-Trade baby just kind of took off unexpectedly. There was a process that went into selecting that ad campaign, and it could have gone either way, but it went skyward. I think that that E-Trade has always kind of been smart about its brand in the marketplace and what's going to resonate with that target audience, which is the more tech forward, tech savvy, kind of upstart. I don't know if upstart is the right word, but I'm getting at, like,
it's a good word.
Yeah. I mean, I love startup culture, and it felt like E-Trade was still a startup culture when I joined, in 2016. So that freshness and that energy, I think, has always been a big part of what makes it a good brand. And I think they just followed that with the E-Trade baby idea into the Super Bowl where it premiered, and that was a long time ago, and it's still going. Like, we just brought it back, in this last Super Bowl, and it still really resonates with people.
It's a very interesting thing. You have the Aflac duck, which has been around a long time. And when you look at the history of brands, some of them 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of a constant thematic, because I think one of the problems with marketers is we get tired of our own work before the consumer is really paying attention. And, the fact that you bring it back says, hey, there must have been some research and insight that helped you realize, hey, it's sticking to the brand values and helping us differentiate our brand values than all the other investment firms out there. So you got to give credit to leadership. Can you share, do they use qualitative, quantitative methodologies of creative selection? Is it intuition or, some combination thereof?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. There's a very long process of deciding what's going to be done and how it's going to be done. You may start out with 10 different ideas on the table, narrow it down to 3, and then one rises to the top. So when this last E-Trade baby campaign came out, I felt like I was one of the last to know because it was being kept very close within the team that was working on it, and they didn't want to leak it too soon and ruin that buzz effect before the big game. So talking with the people that did it afterwards, I kind of learned that it had been going on for a solid year, maybe 9 months to a year, before the game day. So there's a huge process that goes into it and a lot of thought. So I'm sure that qualitative and quantitative metrics and everything else are a part of that.
Good. Elliott, did you have a follow-up question before I close with our closing thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to my last closing question for yours, Russell, was to kind of bring it back a little bit. You gave some great tips there. And can you just share for CMOs that might be considering, taking more of the work in-house, some of the ways you partner and divide and conquer with your external agencies, in your internal agencies? So you kind of started talking to some of that a little bit. This, the Super Bowl spot was an example that I had read, some of the external work teams that were involved along with your internal team. So just as much as you can share, just what are some of the ways you guys divide and conquer and kind of work together as one unified team?
Sure. Personally, I think I would just encourage CMOs to bring as much of that in-house as they can, but again, on a case-by-case basis, being judicious about it. It's not where people sit, but what they're doing. And I think you need to get the people in-house doing the stuff that matters the most to the brand, right? internal people can kind of bring their full attention to your company instead of being on multiple different accounts at once, which is often the case at external agencies. With their tenure, they develop, more intimate knowledge, even a love for the brand. And they benefit from that combined memory or, working knowledge of all the coworkers together as they develop as a team. All of that adds up in really substantive ways over time, I think, and it shows in your work. On the cost side, I think it could be a wash. I mean, depending on what you're doing, it costs money to bring things in-house and it costs money to do things externally. So I would say, look at that upfront investment and, the long tail returns. I think what you're going to see in most cases is a better long tail return bringing things in-house than you would going external. But again, I think there will always be a place for that external agency, and it's just judiciously using one resource or another on a case-by-case basis.
Good. So, I've seen the trend go both ways. It's wonderful to hear your passion for the inside agency. I know one of our large clients moved a ton of work inside and then decided to go the other direction, but clearly you have strong success with it. And so I just want to leave with a closing question. If for anybody who's up and coming as a marketer or a CMO, given all your experience beyond, the in-house advice, just as a leader of creative people, what would you give them as philosophy? How to be a good creative leader?
As philosophy, I don't know.
What's your philosophy? What's your philosophy? Let's just with it. What's your philosophy as a creative leader?
My creative philosophy is just show up and just do it. That's half of it right there. Just show up and do it. I think the things that show in your creative work, besides just being, dedicated to the craft, are things that matter everywhere in life. Be kind, be positive, embrace faith once in a while. Remember that it's about people also and not just the work.
Excellent.
As much as I want to do everything, I can't do everything.
Yeah.
Many hands make light work, and the people that you come across during your career that you can help, do it, and they may return the favor. And if they don't, at least you have the satisfaction of having helped someone. If you want to communicate, which is what creativity and marketing is all about, communicating a product or a service to people, it's just communication. So it needs to be genuine. If you want to succeed in that, kind of work on yourself and just try to be a good person.
Excellent. Eric, thank you very much. I love that, I echo your words. And I just want to close on the thought that on behalf of Elliott and myself, we want to thank you to be as our special guest today. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and your passion and your personal perspectives and your insights over your experience. And I also want to thank everyone who's listening today. So please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And until next time, I'm Russell Kern.
The Continuous Revenue Marketer has been brought to you by Kern, an Omnicom precision marketing agency that helps Fortune 500 companies increase revenue from customer acquisition to loyalty through personalization at speed and scale. For more information, please visit kernagency.com.